Apprenticeship. Learning to love, serve, and be like Jesus with Rebecca and Douglas Pereira.
Welcome to In His Footsteps. We're in the Gospel of Luke, walking alongside Jesus, learning all we can about him.
Our passage today is from Luke chapter 5, verses 33 to 39. Let's have our friend Josiah read us this week's memory verse.
Jesus responded, "Do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not."
In this passage, Jesus is questioned about fasting. At first glance, it seems like a one-off moment. But if we zoom out, we see how it fits in the bigger picture.
Jesus was recently partying with Levi Matthew and his friends. This scandalized the religious elite. They believed that religious purity depends on segregation, on the holy not mixing with the sinful.
This event triggered a range of questions, one of which was about fasting. How come Jesus and his disciples don't fast, like John the Baptist's disciples and the Pharisees?
It is hard for us today to understand why they fixated on fasting. But if we deep into their minds, we'll understand its religious and cultural significance.
Yes, fasting was considered a sacred duty. It wasn't clearly commended in scriptures, but they believed that truly pious people fasted 2 times a week.
And they made sure everyone knew it.
Fasting was really a kind of self-abasement that could get God's attention and earn his favor. It had the double benefit of making others see you as a very holy and religiously serious.
Fasting was originally intended to be one of the ways you could seek God and wait for him. But by the time of this story, it was no longer a means for having an authentic, transformative relationship with God. It had become something else.
Many believe that following ritual observance like fasting would trigger God to act on behalf of the nation. Religious observance and tradition were means to social, national, and political ends. People found their identity and purpose in religious performance rather than in relationship with their Creator and Redeemer.
Rituals and traditions had become the standard for social and religious acceptance. A genuine relationship with God and even personal authenticity were pushed out of the equation.
So, understanding the religious and cultural importance of fasting and other ritual observances, we can see why the religious elite would fixate on Jesus and his disciples not fasting.
He confronts this rigid traditionalism with the radical joy and transformation that comes with God's kingdom. He says that God's presence calls for celebration.
Jesus used the metaphor of being with the groom on his wedding day. This symbolized the restoration of the broken relationship between God and humanity. It was a joyful thing. It would be inappropriate and even impossible to fast and mourn on such an occasion.
I have a way to illustrate this. Just give me a moment, Rebecca. As you know, this year we celebrated 19 years of marriage. Unfortunately, we were not together on July the 2nd. However, we need to celebrate. Jesus compared his presence to a wedding celebration. While Jesus, the groom, is present, it is a time to rejoice, not fast or mourn. Jesus brings a new era of joy and relationship with God, not just rules and rituals. The time for fasting would come later, but now his followers were to celebrate his presence.
God's kingdom transforms us through communion with Him, through joy and celebration over radical grace, rather than through religious duty and external observance.
That's right, Rebecca. God's kingdom is not about behavior modification. It is about changing from the inside out.
Jesus doesn't say that life with Him will be one continuous party. He indicates that there are appropriate times for mourning and fasting. God's kingdom, it's all about relationship with our King. And just like with any relationship, we reach for what is needed at a particular time for the relationship to grow and deepen.
The question for us is, do we cling to rigid limitations, prejudices, exclusions, or rituals for the sake of ritual? Are we open to receiving the kingdom as Jesus presents it, to receive Him, our King, into our lives?
In his workshop.
Our lives are like stories. They have meaning. God uses the different chapters in our stories to shape us and move us towards His purpose for us.
One way God moves us forward in our stories is through transitions. Those in between times that signal change and growth are on the way.
And we have invited Dr. Terry Wallen to return to the apprenticeship to continue sharing with us about transitions. Welcome back, Dr. Terry.
Hey, Douglas and Rebecca. Thanks again for having me. It's my honor to help us begin to understand in a better way how God shapes us over our entire lifetime.
Last time, Dr. Terry shared with us a pathway through a transition. Transitions have life cycles.
The first parts of a transition are called entry and evaluation. This is when the transition begins. We recognize it as a transition and we start trying to figure it out.
The last two parts of the transition life cycle are alignment and direction. This is when we begin a surrender to God's will and discovering His direction for going forth.
I think it would be helpful to do a deeper dive into these parts of a transition, to know more about what's happening in each part and how to tell which part we're in. Dr. Terry, can you tell us more?
Yeah, transitions like we talked on last time have different phases to them. And the first phase is what we call entry. Now, here's the very interesting thing about how transitions begin. We oftentimes don't know we're in a transition till we're well into it. In other words, most of us, are living life. Come on, and we are not so focused in on, even if we should be, focused in on exactly what God's at work doing. So oftentimes, some difficult things happen that get our attention. Oftentimes, some things that bring a lot of questions to our journey get our attention. Oftentimes, in the midst of it, things like loss of job or change in our family situation or challenges in this thing called the church. All of those things are oftentimes used of God to kick us in. But here's what typically happens. We fight like crazy to come up with an answer on our own. So that's why entry can be occurring and we don't even know it. And most people all of a sudden have this moment where they go, okay, I've tried everything I know and it's still not working. What's going on? And what that means is God has used those circumstances to get us to the point where we're already in the journey, even if we didn't understand it. So typically that's what happens in the beginning of a transition. And that's kind of what launches the time of a transition. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, some wounding, some hurt, or some things that are totally confusing that are occurring and we don't understand why.
The entry into a transition sounds very confusing and uncomfortable. Is there anything you would say to someone who is in a transition?
Well, I usually tell them, first of all, here's the good news. This has a name. It's called a transition. I mean, I've coached people, and I've had people tell me, are you kidding? This has a name? I've been flailing away trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong, or why am I doing all these right things and nothing's happened? Are you telling me this has a name? I'm telling you it has a name. It's called a transition. It's a boundary experience. You've hit the end of one phase and you're trying to move into the other. But you can't go into that other without some clarity about the things you learned, the things that you need to value, and some new choices that you need to make. Transitions. So that's one of the first things. It has a name. Second thing I tell them is, and by the way, you're going to really love me after the end of this one. It doesn't actually solve itself overnight. In fact, transitions take some time. This is the part of you loving me. 3 months, get ready, sometimes even 3 years. People just go, what? I want out. But it's true. It's true. It takes time to sort out life. I mean, think about it. We spend all these days and then we want it sorted out overnight? Nah, it's not going to happen. Some of times it involves major healing. Sometimes it involves, facing who we are and who we're not. It can take some time, and I tell them it has a name. It takes some time, but here's the greatest challenge. Get all you can. Get all you can out of transition. Why do I say that? If you're willing to adopt and embrace the fact that Jesus is at work, you want it all. In fact, what you want to say back to Jesus is, I don't want to leave here without getting all of what I'm supposed to be and do as a result of being here. So get all you can out of the transition, because the good news, it will come to an end. And what is the reality? Then you have what you have. Whatever you've been willing to fight for, go after, learn, that's what you'll take with you to the next chapter.
Wow, that's excellent advice and so encouraging. So you've talked about entry into a transition. What about the evaluation part?
Well, entry and evaluation is what I would call now going down underneath. And in some sense, if you can imagine the line that draws from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, there's kind of what I call the water line. In other words, all of the transition itself, you're usually in it before you know it. Then you move into a time of evaluation. And in evaluation, a lot of the time is spent here. And so it's not a time where it's stalled or anything like that. It's a time where we're evaluating, God's revealing, He's even giving us some things to do, to think about. He's bringing new people into our lives. He's introducing the Word of God in new, fresh ways. By the way, people in transitions go, how is it I read this story 1,000,000 times and I never saw that? What is that? Well, that's Spirit of God revealing in new, fresh ways the things now you're going to need. You weren't ready for them before, but now you're going to need. And that's the characteristics. And it's surprising. All of a sudden, people come into your life. It's like, I didn't plan this. That's right, you didn't. But He did. People come into your life. And then He actually causes these moments to happen. I love these moments, by the way, that causes you to go, wow, that was an interesting sermon this morning. I think he was talking to me. I think it's me that he's talking about that needs to do this, try this, step out in this. So that's what starts to happen under the waterline. And here's the weird thing. Everyone else is living above it. You're living underneath it. You're going through all this. They don't know you're going through all this. It's even hard to explain you're going through all this. And you even begin to feel like you're drowning. And the world's even going on, leaving you behind. That's normal in a transition. It's not leaving you behind. God's getting you ready to live into the place he's taking you and us.
I know stories help me understand things. Can you give us an example of someone in the entry and evaluation phases of a transition?
How about me? I mean, how about this? This will really give you a lot of confidence. I was actually teaching the concepts of transition to a lot of leaders, and as I was describing it, I was having this out-of-body experience. Please stay with me. And God was saying, Wally, are you listening to yourself? You're going through this right now. What? And I was been involved in ministry my whole life. I know a lot of you are in marketplace. Way to go. A lot of you are at home raising kings and queens. Way to go. I happen to be in the ministry sector. And guess what? God pushed me out of the organization I was with for 21 years. I thought I felt alone. I felt isolated. I hurt. There was even some wounding in the midst of that situation. God, what are you doing? I mean, I've loved you. I love you. What are you doing in my life? Only to realize that one of the problems I had is I was living for approval. I was living for what everyone else thought of me versus what he thought. And he had to do some work in my life. But guess what began to emerge was he wanted to use me to help others in that way, especially leaders. And as I transitioned out of it, he brought a couple people into my life to help me pray through it and healing and help. I began to realize that, you know what he thinks of me needs to be more important than what they think of me. And you know what? I don't like this, but I used to have, and I still do sometimes, have moments when what you think of me is more important than what he thinks of me. I had to get that right if I was going to move on. He began to open up doors, and here's the rest of the story. What you're hearing right now would have never been written unless I'd gone through that transition. All the stuff I didn't have before it. But once the transition happened and I began to help other people, I had insights and thoughts I never thought I'd have. Now, I'm not telling you that every transition works out wonderfully for all of us. They're hard. But what I'm telling you is each one of us has the desire to do a work and to please our God. We want to hear, well done, how good and faithful servant. But you know what? We don't get to that place unless we go through a series of changes in how we live out our life for Jesus. And I got a chance, and you've got a chance to go through not just one, but you'll go through several transitions en route to hearing these words. But this is how you hear it. Everybody wants to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Well, you do it by being willing to go to the places he wants you to go, not always the places that you want to go.
I love how he emphasized God's sovereignty in all of this. He's got a plan. He knows what we need in order to move forward, and he prepares those people, circumstances, and events to help us. The big question is, are we paying attention? It's an important question to reflect on.
If you want to learn more, I invite you to check out Dr. Terry's book, Stuck. It made a big difference in my life.
Until next time, let's remember our key questions. What is God doing in my life? Do I have the courage to be a part of His work? Am I truly willing to join Him in His work of redemption in my life and all around me?
The Rescue Worker.
In 2006, while walking along a dry riverbed in war-torn Nepal, 19-year-old Maggie Doyne spotted 6-year-old Hima. She was helping her mother break massive boulders into gravel with tiny hands to earn barely enough to survive. When their eyes met, Hima smiled and called out, "Namaste, Didi. Hello, big sister." That simple greeting and radiant smile amid desperate circumstances moved Maggie to ask Hima if she wanted to go to school. Her quiet yes prompted Maggie to use her babysitting savings to enroll one child in school.
That experience changed the direction of Maggie's life. She formed the Blink Now Foundation, which provides a home for 50 children, educates over 400 students, and empowers entire communities in Nepal.
Maggie discovered that when we allow human suffering to move our hearts toward action, God shapes our service to address the full spectrum of physical, emotional, educational, and spiritual needs around us.
We are exploring godly service, using our God-given spiritual gifts in our God-given way to be His rescue workers.
Previously, we touched on how God views service, but let's take a deeper dive, shall we? Service is not merely an activity we do. Our spiritual gifts are not ends in themselves. For God, service is His answer to human need. He has given us beautiful examples of this.
One example is when the Israelites traveled through the desert wilderness for decades. God gave them food, water, and shade. He was their compass and the pillar of cloud by the day and the pillar of fire by night.
And the ultimate example was
Jesus. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus gave His mission statement. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come.
He shows us that the heart of authentic service is meeting a need, not merely exercising a gift. Spiritual gifts are tools designed to meet the broad array of human needs.
Let's unpack what we mean by human needs. The Bible teaches that we are integrated beings. We have a physical body with its physical and environmental needs. We have a mind with its thought, life, and knowledge needs. We have a heart with its emotional needs, and we have spiritual needs, encompassing our connection with God and each other. What affects one aspect of our lives affects them all.
Take me, for example. When I'm exhausted, my body needs rest. But that's not all I need. Exhaustion negatively affects my ability to work. It impacts my thought life. It makes me moodier. He knows that. And it's rough on my relationship with family and even with God. No need is purely one need.
This is why God gives a diversity of spiritual gifts. For a classic example, we can look at a food bank. They directly meet the need of hunger, but they also are welcoming and kind. They get to know the community. They meet the emotional and even spiritual needs of their clients. What started off as meeting hunger became meeting many deeper but very real needs.
Well, I'm very excited about needs-driven service. Where do I sign up? How do I get started?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Rebecca. Typically, people start by trying to identify their spiritual gifts. Then, they look for ways to use them. But the Bible teaches that often our calling comes first. Then comes divine empowerment. In other words, we are giving first what we will do with our spiritual gifts. And then we discover the gifts that God has given us to use.
The question is not, what are my gifts? Here are some questions we can ask ourselves instead. What needs consistently burden my heart? Where do I see problems that others seem to overlook? What injustice or sufferings move me to action? What needs do I find myself naturally drawn to address? The answers to these questions will set us on the right path for our divine assignment.
When we rely on God's guidance and input from godly people, we will find the divine match between our divine assignment and our spiritual gifts.
We've been linking service with divine assignment. But let's not forget that service is also a lifestyle. We can serve in large and small ways. Basically, wherever a need arises, we meet it.
It will sometimes be inconvenient or costly or uncomfortable, but we serve anyway.
The service lifestyle calls for cultivating compassion. We learn to see others through God's eyes by reading in the Bible what moves God's heart, by praying and meditating on Scripture, and by exposure to human need. We need to get out there, eyes wide open, ears tuned in, hearts awake.
Service aligns our hearts with God's heart for hurting people, and it makes us His instruments of love and healing in a world that desperately needs hope.